All right, so hello everyone. I thought I would make one of these, just interesting to discuss different things that are going on. A lot of stuff is going on, and I thought this was an interesting story that I thought is worth discussing. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an anecdote to kind of get into kind of what this, I wouldn't say episode, but kind of podcast or something we'll be talking about is I've been living in the house that I'm currently in not too long, but we just moved back into the house. This is actually where I was born. I've been moving back and forth between houses, but one thing that hasn't changed is I have a neighbor right across the street. And I don't know him very well. But around the 2016 election, I remember, I wasn't currently living here, but we would drive back and forth between houses and stuff of that sort, and up since the 2016 election, up until very recently, he has had a Trump sign right in his yard, so he has been a Trump supporter this entire time. I don't know a whole lot about him. I know that he is a military veteran. He fought in the Vietnam War. So definitely, I'm very grateful for his service, as we should all be. An interesting thing just happened, though. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, some interesting things have been happening in the news. Interestingly enough, in correlation with that, that sign is currently gone from his yard. There is no more Trump sign in his yard. And if you are not aware, I think we can reasonably say that that is because of some recent comments that Donald Trump has, that have been uncovered by Donald Trump, or by the Atlantic magazine, that Donald Trump made back in 2018 surrounding our military and veterans. These are just hearsay. These are things that were reported by multiple of his inside staff members, corroborated by multiple news outlets. But just like with Donald Trump's allegations of sexual, misconduct, to put it lightly, but obviously some of those do detail assault, they have been corroborated by his own words. In the same way that many women have come forward accusing Donald Trump of sexual assault, harassment, the whole bunch, he has also bragged about it on tape, therefore corroborating a lot of these and making these much more believable. In the same way that these are, in a sense, just allegations that were made about comments that he made from multiple people involved in the administration, he has said things in the past towards our military, towards specific distinguished members like John McCain, calling them losers and things of the sort. Even if he denies it, Twitter has records of what he said. So he has made those comments. So I'm sorry, Mr. President, you don't get the benefit of the doubt here. What you did and what you said was most likely this, based on your previous behavior. So for this segment, we're going to go under the assumption that he said these things, because it is more than likely that he did say these things, as his previous actions indicate so. So we're going to operate off that assumption, but I just want everyone to know that technically these have not been proven, but they have been corroborated by multiple White House officials who worked at the time. So let's get into this, what exactly happened. So I'm going to bring my screen down just a little bit. If I can do this, awesome. Oh, all right, right here. So as you can see right here, a recent article published in The Atlantic. It was published, and it talked about, it was by Jeffrey Goldberg, and it talked about some comments that Trump made back in 2018 when he visited a war memorial for those who died in World War I, fighting with France and the Allies. The trip was canceled. He didn't end up actually going. The reason Trump says that he didn't go was because of bad weather. He insisted on going, but the Secret Service just wouldn't let him. Well, other people have different accounts of the incident. As it says here, Trump rejected the idea of going because he didn't want his hair to get disheveled in the rain, and because he simply didn't believe it was important to honor these people. He thought, he said his exact comments, if we read them, at least what senior staff members corroborate, he said, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." Separate conversation. He referred to the people who died, the 1,800 Marines who lost their lives, as suckers for getting killed. So these were comments that were made. These are ones that Trump vehemently denies. These are ones that Trump, the very religious man that he is, the man of God, says that he will put his hand on a Bible and swear. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't know if you guys know, but when you lie 17,000 times in your presidential term, your word means nothing. So he can say that all he wants. Considering the fact that he's had affairs with all three of his wives, we know he's not really any sort of, Christian person. He may proclaim to be to get the evangelical vote, but let's be honest here, he does not really adhere to any of the teachings of the Bible. So I think that's a little bit ironic. But so let's talk about that. What I think is crazy about this, at least coming from my perspective, is how I'm not fazed by this at all. In no way am I surprised that these comments were made whatsoever at all. It does not surprise me in the slightest. That's the scariest part. The scariest part is this isn't even close to any of the worst things that Trump has done. If this is a scale of the severity of Donald Trump's comments towards people, I'd say this is probably like right here. And that's the scary part. This is the type of stuff that if Obama did, if any other president, or even person in general did, this is the stuff you would resign over. Completely tarnishing, basically disregarding the sacrifice that these troops made in World War I and beyond. Like, this is something that presidents would resign over. But considering it's Donald Trump, there really is no set standard. This is just, as we would say, back page news. It just wouldn't even make the front page. I mean, yeah, this is a huge story, and rightfully so. But considering stuff like this has become so normalized, it's honestly astonishing that we just accept this. And it doesn't surprise me. It's not out of line with his character. Because it's very clear through many of Donald Trump's actions that he's not interested in anyone but himself. It's very clear. It is completely clear that Donald Trump does not care. So these comments don't surprise me. So it was interesting, considering how many people are responding to this. I mean, obviously, people in the military are not responding well to this, as I'm going to circle back to, my anecdote of my neighbor who recently took down their Trump sign. But I think what's interesting about this, many people would, praise at least my neighbor if they heard this story for, taking down his Trump sign. Finally, yes, good. You've taken it down. I don't see it that way. I see it as a little bit selfish. I see it as it took you this long. I'd say that straight white men are the only group and the one group that have been exempt from Trump's criticism and, Trump's tirades of insults against, the only group that he really hasn't attacked. I mean, his comments towards women, his comments of, calling women fat, pigs, broads, flat-chested women are very hard to be a 10, referencing Megyn Kelly, saying that she had blood coming out of her, bragging about how he doesn't need to ask for consent when engaging, in encounters with women because he's famous and powerful. Comments like these, comments like for any decent person, would completely disqualify them from the office of presidency, or honestly, really any office whatsoever at all, or, public figure, public, platform. So, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I think when we look at it, his comments towards, Mexicans, generalizing many of the people coming across the border as rapists and criminals. And many people like to say, oh, he was just referring to MS-13. If you watch the whole thing, yeah, of course he says, and I assume some of them are good people. But when you describe them as rapists and criminals, and then say, oh yeah, but some of them are probably good, you're characterizing the group as bad and then focusing in on the good, which I think is completely just disgusting to do. I mean, we can talk about that. We could talk about the many instances of racism within the Trump administration. I mean, obviously, we can just start out with Stephen Miller, his, consultant on many immigration policies, has literally shown that he does not want immigrants in this country. He's literally referenced books about, like white genocide and things of that sort, and maintaining a white majority in this country, and how he feels that those coming over the border are a threat to our way of life. So, that's the case. Him referencing that 4 members of Congress should go back to the countries from which they came, all of them who are U.S. citizens. These people, if you just want to know, they're Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, representative from New York, Ilhan Omar, representative from Minnesota, Ayanna Pressley, I think also a representative from New York, and I'm missing one, Rashida Tlaib, a representative from Michigan, I believe. So yeah, he referenced that. All 4 of them are U.S. citizens, 3 of which were born here. One of them, Omar, was born in Somalia, but she's completely a U.S. citizen, just like we are. So him telling them to go back to the country from which they came, clearly something that has often been used in a racially, insensitive way, telling people to go back to where they came from, not something that we necessarily like to praise in a sense. So that's interesting. I think, as a straight white male myself, these comments should be as important to me as his comments about veterans. It's veterans include straight white males. And it's kind of the first group that he's gone after that include those people. So I don't like to draw too many parallels, and I think that you can draw many parallels that can be unfair, or many parallels that people feel are not justified. I think this one fits. I mean, actually, I want to go over a few things first before we get into, I think, a really, really, really interesting conversation surrounding what I just discussed. But let's go over some of Donald Trump's comments surrounding John McCain. John McCain, if you don't know, he was a war veteran. He was actually captured in battle and, was tortured, actually, and actually didn't end up leaving until his entire infantry was released from prison with him. So he stayed, and he was the last one until they all were able to be freed. Absolute hero. And he should definitely, he is a hero. And to suggest he's anything less is completely, appalling. And of course, Donald Trump, a draft dodger who didn't go in, and he blamed it on Bone Spurs, felt like he wanted to weigh in on this. He denies ever calling John McCain a loser, as he says. Well, unfortunately, Mr. President, Twitter is not like Snapchat stories, and things don't delete after 24 hours. So we actually have a record of everything he said. So let's go over Donald Trump talking about John McCain. This is a tweet by him, by the way. So Donald Trump right here, I don't know, can I zoom in? Oh, that's awesome. All right, so Donald Trump, July 11th, 2015, retweets an article by actually a far-right source that actually talks about, that actually ends up talking about how his exact comments. So before you question the credibility of this source, just know that Donald Trump retweeted it, meaning that he endorses the messages in here. Otherwise, he wouldn't have retweeted it. So I also think it's kind of interesting that if we look here, the first line is billionaire real estate mogul. Of course, he needs to have everyone know that about him. I'd be curious to see his tax returns. I think it would probably show maybe he's not even a billionaire. But let's get into this. Just so you guys know, I have this here, but just to prove I'm not going to any other source, I'm going to click on it. So it will open this exact article that I'm mentioning. So this is an article written, obviously, he tweeted it, I think the same day it was written, interestingly enough. But yeah, so the article, the first line is Donald Trump. John McCain is a loser. Interesting to say the least. But we'll scroll down. All right. Him with a weird thing on a plane, but here we go. Billionaire real estate mogul. All right, let's go. So John McCain, let's see. So John McCain, the left-leaning U.S. senator. He was a Republican, by the way. He ran against Obama. And here it is. Trump said, "I don't like losers." He said, called McCain a dummy. And his third slam, which it says drawing criticism, Trump retweeted this, so apparently he believes in it. Trump was told that McCain is a war hero. He absolutely was a war hero. Absolutely was. And Trump said he wasn't a war hero, and he wasn't a war hero because he was captured. Okay? I like people that weren't captured. Think about that. He said John McCain is not a hero because he was captured. A man who sacrificed himself for the betterment of our country, for the betterment of the rest of his infantry, Donald Trump says is a loser and a dummy because he was captured. Let's see. Let's draw parallels between these comments. Donald Trump says John McCain is a loser and a dummy because and he's not a hero because he got captured. He got captured within the Vietnam War. So let's think about this. What comments were made as well? What comments were made before? If we get into it. All right, Donald Trump is accused of saying that these people are losers. Why? Well, I mean, it's a cemetery. These people died. Well, if he thinks that people who were captured are losers, I don't think it's too much of a stretch that he thinks people who were killed in battle were losers. If he thinks of everything like a game, clearly if you die, that must be a loss. I guess he's not able to see past the fact that these people serving their country was a net positive. These are heroes. These are people that should be celebrated. He allegedly called them losers. And in this article, which he retweeted, therefore he endorses, he said that John McCain was a loser because he was captured. So it's not hard to believe that what he said here was completely plausible and probable. It makes complete sense that this is what he would say. And he goes on to it. Interestingly enough, we talks about Lindsey Graham here, which, by the way, in 2015 or up to any point, Lindsey Graham was not a Trump fan. Lindsey Graham was one of the most vocally critical people of Donald Trump. Lindsey Graham has a famous quote from the Clinton impeachment about talking about how the president doesn't even have to commit a crime to be impeached. Talking about the Clinton impeachment, he just has to, what is it? I don't remember the exact quote. I'm going to quote it as best as I can. I didn't have it up. But it was about how impeachment is not even about crimes. It's about restoring decency to the office. Therefore, the president doesn't even have to commit a crime. Now, Trump did obviously commit many crimes, and a couple of which he was being impeached for, a couple of which actually were proven, but yet again acquitted because it was a completely partisan trial. But Lindsey Graham is there saying that. Lindsey Graham, completely rushed to his fellow warmonger's defense as they describe John McCain. So this is completely even worse. If there was any doubt that Trump should not be our commander-in-chief, this stupid statement should end all doubt. Graham tweeted. Lindsey Graham said that Donald Trump should not be president. Back when he said this. Interesting how he's one of Trump's most vocal allies now. It's interesting how you can throw all your morals out the window for power and money. It's very interesting. So this is what happened here. This is clearly here. And if we draw the distinction between what happened here and what he said here, it makes sense. It makes 100% sense that if Donald Trump thinks that if you get captured in the war, you're a loser, then why wouldn't he say that if you die, you're a loser? It's very plausible. He doesn't get the benefit of the doubt here due to his past comments. It's very probable. So I want to go back to something that I was talking about before, and I was talking about my neighbor a little bit, how he ended up throwing out his Trump sign after Trump made these comments about military members, which applies to him. I think it's very interesting, and I'm going to read this because I think this applies a little bit. This is a quote by, if you are not quite sure, his name is Martin Niemöller. He was, as you talk about, Lutheran minister, talks about here, he was an early Nazi supporter, but he ended up rejecting Nazi principles and was imprisoned for it. So his quote here is, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." I think this is very interesting when we think about it in the context of this whole idea of the neighbor not coming out until now. Well, first Donald Trump, I mean, this has been, the interesting part is it's not like it's as sequential. This is not as chronological when it comes to Trump, because Trump has basically been attacking all of these minority groups sequentially, but let's just consider it sequentially. So first Donald Trump came after immigrants. Well, I guess my neighbor didn't speak out because he wasn't an immigrant. Then Donald Trump came after African Americans with his comments, telling four congresswomen of color to go back to their countries. And I guess he didn't speak out, didn't feel like he needed to speak out because, well, he wasn't a person of color. He didn't feel like he needed to. Then Donald Trump, obviously, I mean, this happened simultaneously. He came after women many different times, and he didn't speak out because he wasn't a woman. He wasn't a woman. Then, well, Donald Trump came after the veterans, and, he was part of the veteran group, and it seems like there's no one left. It seems like Donald Trump has come after every single group now. There's no one who is free from the criticism of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has come after every single minority group, and now finally he's come after our veterans. A group that actually Donald Trump was polling incredibly well. He had, a 2-to-1 vote over Hillary Clinton among veterans. So 2 veterans were voting for Trump for everyone that was voting for Hillary. So, I mean, he had a strong hold, but polls show now that veteran support with Donald Trump, military support, is dropping. I mean, huge names are coming out against Donald Trump regarding this. So this is very interesting. I think that what's interesting is this is literally like a speck on a speck of the presidency or even the life of Donald Trump. I mean, for the past 4 years, Donald Trump has been saying things like this. And it's interesting that not until now have we really come out, or at least people decided that this is too much. So I'm going to make myself back up to this because I don't think what we're looking at there is important. But so I want to discuss a little bit about that. I want to discuss, obviously, I am a straight white male. And I think it's very important to look at how we address different issues. I remember, obviously, as you should know, Martin Luther King Jr. said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice anywhere. I think that's very important. I think that when Donald Trump comes after any group, whether it be Muslims through his travel ban to majority Muslim countries, whether it is immigrants with his rhetoric and his statements of building a wall to keep out, rapists and criminals, whether it be his statements against women, as I said before, calling women, fat pigs, they can't be good enough if they don't have a good body, things like that coming out against them, whether it be his comments against people of color of that sort, many acts in the past of him being a landlord and not, renting out apartments to people of color, which he got sued for, many things involving his casino. So a lot of these things up until this point, and honestly still to this point, I mean, I have a grandfather, both of my grandfathers and my stepdad served in the military. So obviously for him to think that their sacrifice, makes them a loser, I think is, disgusting. I think it's absolutely disgusting that he would say anything of that sort. But yeah, I think it's very important for everyone to speak out. If anyone is being attacked, just because it's not you particularly who's getting attacked, we're all American. Everyone is American. And if you want to go beyond that, we're all human. Every single one of us belongs to the human race. And an attack on anyone is an attack on us. An attack on any group of Americans in particular is an attack on us. We're not separate. Just because you may not be Muslim, just because you may not be an immigrant, just because you may not be a woman, and just because you might not be LGBTQ, as Trump has also gone after them with many policies, including, cutting, access to healthcare for those who are transgender or things of that sort. Just because you're not part of any of those groups, like me, does not mean that these actions do not have relevance to you. That's not what that means. Because that's what empathy is about. And because if we're not empathetic and we don't take threats against others as threats against ourselves, well, guess what happens? Things like this happen. If we're only pertained and concerned about ourselves, if we only focus on how we're doing, the fundamental aspect of individualism, focusing on the individual, yourself, if we're only focused on that, stuff like that happens. Cooperation is very important, and we need to be focused on helping each other, and we need to not allow people like Donald Trump to use their rhetoric to divide the country, because it is completely dangerous and is something that will lead down a path that we don't want to go. And that's why this election is so crucial. So I hope you enjoyed this. I enjoy making these. I enjoy discussing things of this nature. Let me know. Let me know what other topics you want me to cover. I'd be happy to do so. I just thought this would be an interesting thing to discuss of that sort. But yeah, this is definitely a time that we're all going to look back in 40 years and realize the huge moment of history. I think this election, they always talk about the election of 1800, what is it, election of 1860 of Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, things of that sort as huge turning points. I think the election of 2020 is going to be a turning point as well, whether we, choose to, can re-elect someone who has over and over and over shown that they are not capable of leading our country in a direction that will lead us to, betterment, or if we don't do that and elect someone who will hopefully, and I'm going to say this, hopefully allow us to get to a better place. I'm not saying Biden is the end-all be-all. Not at all. I have my issues with Biden. I choose not to be as vocal about them because I feel any criticism of Biden at this point is only going to help Trump. Because the re-election of Donald Trump is disastrous to our country. If we want any hope of getting certain policies, like whether it be universal health care, universal child care, universal paid maternity leave so women don't feel disenfranchised when they have children, things of that sort. Allow prescription drug prices not to be exponentially higher. Things of that sort. Biden is the transitionary stage to get there. So that's why that's so crucial. So I hope you enjoyed watching, and make sure to get out and vote. It's definitely important, one of the most important elections, definitely the most important election in my lifetime. I mean, I've only been alive 17 years, not saying much, but I recently spoke with, I made a video about this a little bit. I recently spoke with someone. His name is, I don't know if you're familiar with him, his name is Shel Lubar. Very, very successful person. Definitely done a lot of good for the city of Milwaukee. But I talked with him, and he, I think, is over the. I know he's over the age of 90. I'm not quite sure how, but I asked him a simple question. I made a video about it, and I asked him. I said, "What is the most significant, historically significant event over 9 decades on this earth?" I mean, and interestingly enough, he said, "Well, the election and presidency of Donald Trump." So keep that in mind. This is someone who lived through the Great Depression, World War II, the Vietnam War, 9/11, things of that sort, like all of that, the civil rights movement, all of that. And he points to this as the most significant, basically, point in our history over what is almost the past century, considering that he's over 90. That is insane to think about, considering his perspective. So I ask you to consider that. I think that is very interesting, and yeah, so it's really important to get out and vote. So thank you all for watching.